The Arizona desert stretched endlessly under the blazing sun as Jake Iron Horse Mackenzie rode toward the Apache settlement where his wife Ayanna waited. 3 months of cattle driving had left him dusty, tired, and aching for the comfort of familiar arms. His leather chaps creaked rhythmically against his saddle, and the scent of horse sweat and desert sage filled his nostrils. Jake had married Ayanna 2 years ago after winning her in an honorable challenge against her previous suitor. She was a woman of fire and passion, with eyes like obsidian and skin the color of desert honey. Their union had bridged 2 worlds, the white rancher's domain and the ancient Apache ways. As he approached their shared lodge, Jake could hear feminine laughter echoing from within. Ayanna's voice mingled with another, higher, more musical, unfamiliar. He dismounted his stallion and pushed aside the buffalo hide entrance, his spurs jingling softly. "My husband returns." Ayanna rose gracefully, her buckskin dress hugging curves that still made Jake's mouth go dry. She moved toward him with the fluid grace of a mountain cat, her long black hair swaying like silk. But Jake's attention was immediately drawn to the second woman in the lodge. She sat cross-legged by the fire, and if Ayanna was beautiful, this woman was devastating. Younger than his wife by perhaps 3 years, she possessed the same high cheekbones and full lips. But where Ayanna's beauty was warm earth, this woman was wildfire. "Jake," Ayanna said, her hand resting on his chest. "Meet my sister, Kaya. She has traveled far from the northern tribes to visit us." Kaya looked up through thick lashes, and Jake felt something primal stir in his gut. Her eyes held a challenge, a wildness that made his blood run hot. She wore traditional Apache dress, but the way the soft leather clung to her body was anything but traditional in its effect. "Sister," Jake managed, touching his hat brim respectfully, though his voice came out rougher than intended. Kaya smiled, a slow, knowing curve of lips that suggested she was well aware of her effect on men. "The famous Iron Horse," she said, her English accented but clear. "Ayanna has told me much about your prowess." The way she said prowess made Jake shift uncomfortably. There was something in her tone, a double meaning that made his leather pants feel suddenly tight. That evening, as they shared a meal of roasted rabbit and corn cakes, Jake found himself stealing glances at Kaya. She moved with an unconscious sensuality that was both innocent and provocative. When she reached for food, her dress pulled tight across her chest. When she laughed, her head tilted back, exposing the graceful column of her throat. "You seem distracted, husband," Ayanna observed with amusement. Jake cleared his throat. "Just tired from the trail." Kaya's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Perhaps you need relaxation. In my tribe, we have special ways to ease a warrior's tension." "Kaya knows many things I do not," Ayanna said thoughtfully. "She was trained by the medicine women in arts I never learned." Jake nearly choked on his water. "Arts?" "The healing touch," Kaya explained innocently, though her eyes held anything but innocence. "Ways to release pressure that builds up in a man's body during long journeys." The lodge suddenly felt very warm despite the evening air. Jake loosened his neckerchief, acutely aware of both women watching him. "My sister," Ayanna continued, "has always been more adventurous than I, more willing to explore new territories." Kaya leaned forward, and Jake caught a glimpse of smooth skin beneath her dress. "I believe in experiencing all that life offers. Some call it wild, but I call it thorough." Jake's mouth went dry. "Thorough?" "She means," Ayanna said with a smile that held secrets, "that Kaya approaches everything with great enthusiasm. She never does anything halfway." The conversation continued, but Jake found it increasingly difficult to concentrate. Every word seemed loaded with hidden meaning. Every glance from Kaya felt like a physical touch. When she mentioned learning the ancient positions from tribal elders, Jake had to excuse himself to step outside for air. Under the star-filled sky, he tried to collect his thoughts. He was a married man, devoted to Ayanna, but something about Kaya stirred desires he thought he'd buried, awakened hungers that his wife's love had never quite satisfied. When he returned to the lodge, he found the sisters sitting close together, whispering. They looked up as he entered, and Ayanna's expression was unreadable. "Husband," she said slowly, "Kaya and I have been talking. About you, about us, about possibilities." Jake's heart began to pound. What kind of possibilities? Ayana exchanged a look with her sister, then turned back to him. You are a good man, Jake, but I see the restlessness in your eyes. The hunger for new experiences. Ayana, she held up a hand. Let me finish. Kaya will be with us for 1 moon. She is curious about the white man's ways, and I am curious about sharing. The words hung in the air like smoke from the fire. Jake stared at his wife, certain he had misunderstood. You're saying, I'm saying, Ayana continued, her voice steady, that perhaps you should experience what my sister has to offer. She is wilder than I, more experimental, and I think it might awaken things in all of us. Kaya's smile was pure temptation. If you're brave enough, Iron Horse. Jake spent a sleepless night wrestling with his conscience and his desires. By morning, he had convinced himself that Ayana's suggestion was merely sisterly teasing, that nothing would actually come of it. But when he emerged from the lodge to tend his horses, he found Kaya waiting by the corral, her presence like a magnet drawing his attention. She wore a different dress today, softer buckskin that seemed to caress her curves with every movement. Her hair was braided with colorful beads that caught the morning light, and she moved with the fluid grace of a dancer. Good morning, Iron Horse, she said, her voice like honey over gravel. Ayana has gone to gather herbs. She said I should keep you company. Jake's hand stilled on his horse's bridle. Keep me company. Kaya approached slowly, like a predator stalking prey. She also said I should show you some of our tribal customs, things that might interest a man of your appetites. My appetites. Jake's voice came out strangled. Kaya was close enough now that he could smell her, sage and wildflowers and something uniquely feminine that made his head spin. A man who rides hard, works hard, needs. Release that matches his intensity. She reached out and touched his chest, her fingers tracing the muscles beneath his shirt. Jake's breath caught as she explored the contours of his torso with innocent curiosity. In my tribe, she continued, her hand moving lower, we believe that pleasure should be like a wild river, powerful, unpredictable, overwhelming. Jake caught her wrist, but didn't push her away. Kaya, I'm married to your sister. And she wants you to be happy, Kaya replied, stepping even closer. She wants you to experience things she cannot give you. What things? Kaya's smile was wicked. I know positions that would make a warrior weep with pleasure. Ways of joining that your white world has never imagined. The broken arrow position, for instance. The what? An ancient technique passed down through generations of Apache women. It requires flexibility, trust, and a willingness to surrender completely to sensation. Jake's imagination ran wild, his body responding despite his mental protests. Don't think, Kaya whispered, her lips nearly touching his ear. Feel. Her hand moved to the leather ties of his shirt, and Jake found himself paralyzed by conflicting desires. Part of him wanted to pull away to honor his marriage vows. But a larger part, the part that had been awakened by months of hard living and harder desires, wanted to see where this dangerous game would lead. Ayana knows, Kaya continued, her fingers working at his shirt. She knows you need more than gentle loving. You need passion that matches your strength, fire that burns as hot as your blood. Jake's shirt fell open, and Kaya's hands explored his chest with reverent appreciation. Her touch was different from Ayana's, more aggressive, more demanding. Where his wife was gentle rain, Kaya was a thunderstorm. You're beautiful, she murmured, her nails lightly scraping his skin. Like a stallion, all power and barely contained wildness. Jake groaned, his resistance crumbling. This is madness. The best things usually are, Kaya agreed, her mouth moving to his throat. Let me show you what wildness really means. Just as Jake was about to surrender completely, Ayana's voice called from the lodge. Kaya, Jake! Come, I have prepared the morning meal. They sprang apart, both breathing hard. Kaya's eyes were bright with triumph and unfulfilled desire, while Jake felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Tonight, Kaya whispered, adjusting her dress. When the moon is high and Ayana sleeps. Meet me by the sacred pool. I'll show you the broken arrow position. And other things that will change how you think about pleasure forever. She walked away with deliberate sensuality, leaving Jake standing by the corral with his shirt hanging open and his body aching with need. At breakfast, Ayana seemed oblivious to the tension crackling between her husband and sister. She chattered about her herb gathering, about the weather, about tribal gossip. But occasionally, Jake caught her watching them with knowing eyes, and he wondered if his wife was more aware than she let on. "Kaya," Ayanna said suddenly, "why don't you show Jake the old hunting trails this afternoon? He should know the land better if he's to live among our people." Kaya's smile was pure innocence. "Of course, sister. I would be happy to guide him through unfamiliar territory." Jake nearly choked on his coffee at the double meaning. This was going to be the longest day of his life. The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly as Kaya led Jake through winding canyon paths that seemed to exist outside of time. She moved ahead of him with the sure-footed grace of someone born to this harsh landscape, her hips swaying hypnotically with each step. Jake found himself mesmerized by the play of muscles beneath her buckskin dress, the way her hair caught the light like spun obsidian. "This trail," Kaya called over her shoulder, "leads to places few white men have seen. Sacred places where my people have performed rituals for generations." Jake's mouth was dry from more than just the desert heat. "What kind of rituals?" Kaya paused at a narrow ledge, turning to face him with eyes that held ancient secrets. "Ceremonies of joining, of awakening, of teaching young warriors how to please their women, and how to be pleased in return." The path had narrowed so that Jake had to move closer to pass. As he did, Kaya pressed herself against the rock wall, forcing him to brush against her body. The contact sent electricity through both of them. "Careful," she whispered, her breath hot against his neck. One wrong step here could be dangerous. They continued climbing until they reached a hidden plateau where a natural pool reflected the sky like a mirror. Steam rose from the water's surface, indicating hot springs beneath. Ancient petroglyphs covered the surrounding rocks, images of figures in various poses that made Jake's imagination run wild. "The sacred pool," Kaya announced, beginning to unlace her dress, "where Apache women have taught their men the deepest mysteries for countless generations." Jake's eyes widened as she began to disrobe. "Kaya, what are you doing?" "The water has healing properties," she explained matter-of-factly, though her eyes held wicked promise. "It prepares the body for intense experiences. Surely a man who has ridden the hard trail needs cleansing." She slipped out of her dress with fluid grace, revealing skin the color of desert honey and curves that would make angels weep. Jake tried to look away but found himself transfixed by her natural beauty. "Don't be shy, Iron Horse," Kaya teased, wading into the steaming water. "In my culture, the body is sacred, not shameful. Besides," she added with a sultry smile, "how can I teach you the broken arrow position if you remain clothed?" Jake's hands moved to his gun belt almost without conscious thought. The rational part of his mind screamed warnings, but his body had taken control. He stripped methodically, aware of Kaya's appreciative gaze on his muscled form. The hot water enveloped him like a lover's embrace as he entered the pool. Kaya moved closer, her body cutting through the water with serpentine grace. "Now," she said, her voice husky with promise, "let me show you what my sister cannot." Her hands found his shoulders, kneading the tension from muscles knotted by months of hard riding. Her touch was firm, confident, knowing exactly where to apply pressure to make him groan with relief. "The broken arrow position," she explained, her hands moving lower, "requires complete trust. The woman becomes the bow, the man the arrow. But the arrow must be properly prepared." Jake's breath caught as her ministrations grew more intimate. "Prepared how?" "Patience," Kaya murmured, her lips brushing his ear. "First we must awaken every nerve, every sensation. The Apache way is not rushed. It builds like a storm, slowly, inevitably, until the thunder shakes the very earth." Her hands worked magic on his body, finding pressure points he didn't know existed. Jake felt his control slipping away like sand through fingers. "Kaya," he groaned. "This is necessary," she finished. "Ayanna sent you to me for a reason. She knows what you need, what you crave. She loves you enough to give you what she cannot." Just as Jake thought he might lose himself completely in her touch, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. Ayanna appeared at the edge of the pool, but instead of anger, her face showed only serene acceptance. "I thought I might find you here," she said calmly, beginning to remove her own clothing. The sacred pool calls to all who seek enlightenment. Jake stared in shock as his wife joined them in the water. "Ayanna, I can explain." "There is nothing to explain," she said, moving to his other side. "This is what I wanted." What we all wanted, even if we didn't know it, Kaya smiled triumphantly. I told you she understood. Ayana's hands joined her sister's in their ministrations, and Jake found himself caught between two forces of nature. The broken arrow position, Ayana explained, requires 2 women and 1 man. It is an ancient ceremony of bonding, of sharing power and pleasure. Jake's world tilted on its axis. You planned this? We plan to set you free, Kaya whispered. Free from the constraints of your white world's narrow thinking. Free to experience pleasure as the Great Spirit intended, Ayana added, her touch growing bolder. As the sun set over the sacred pool, Jake realized that his life had just taken a turn into territory more wild and uncharted than any frontier he had ever explored. The moon hung full and silver over the sacred pool as the 3 figures moved together in the steaming water like dancers performing an ancient ritual. Jake felt as though he had stepped outside of time itself, into a realm where the normal rules of civilization no longer applied. Ayana and Kaya worked in perfect harmony, their hands mapping every inch of his body with reverent attention. Where Ayana's touch was familiar comfort, Kaya's was electric discovery. Together they created sensations that Jake had never imagined possible. The broken arrow position, Kaya explained, her voice husky with desire, represents the moment when rigid control gives way to fluid surrender. The arrow breaks not from weakness, but from the overwhelming force of the bow's power. She guided Jake to the smooth rocks at the pool's edge, positioning him with the confidence of someone who had studied these ancient arts her entire life. Ayana moved to support him from behind, her familiar curves pressing against his back while Kaya faced him, her eyes burning with wild promise. In this position, Ayana whispered against his ear, "You must let go of everything you think you know about pleasure. Trust us to guide you to places your mind has never conceived." Jake's breath came in ragged gasps as the sisters began their synchronized dance of seduction. Their movements were fluid, hypnotic, designed to overwhelm his senses completely. Every touch sent lightning through his nervous system. Every caress built the pressure inside him like steam in a boiler. "Feel how your body responds," Kaya murmured, her hands exploring with scientific precision. "This is what it means to be truly alive, truly free." The water lapped around them as they moved together, creating ripples that caught the moonlight like scattered diamonds. Jake felt his consciousness expanding, his awareness heightened to an almost painful degree. Every sensation was magnified, every touch a revelation. "Now," Ayana breathed, "the true broken arrow begins." What followed was unlike anything in Jake's experience. The sisters moved with practiced coordination, their bodies creating a living sculpture of desire and fulfillment. Jake found himself caught in their rhythm, his own movements guided by instincts older than civilization. Kaya's wildness complemented Ayana's tenderness perfectly, creating a symphony of sensation that built toward an inevitable crescendo. Jake felt his control fragmenting like glass under pressure, his rigid self-discipline dissolving in the face of overwhelming pleasure. "Let go," Kaya commanded, her voice fierce with passion. "Break like the arrow and be reborn." The thunder in the desert came like a force of nature, shaking Jake to his very core. His release was so intense that he cried out to the star-filled sky, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. The sisters held him as he shattered and reformed, their own pleasure mingling with his in a chorus of ecstasy that seemed to last forever. Afterward, they floated together in the warm water, their bodies intertwined like the roots of ancient trees. Jake felt fundamentally changed, as though some essential part of him had been awakened for the first time. "How do you feel?" Ayana asked softly, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. Jake struggled to find words. "Like I've been struck by lightning. Like I've been reborn." Kaya laughed, the sound like silver bells in the night air. "That is the power of the broken arrow. It breaks you open so that you can be filled with new understanding." "And now?" Jake asked, still trying to process what had happened. "Now," Ayana said, "we return to our lodge as 3 instead of 2. Kaya will stay with us, and we will explore all the territories that remain unmapped." Jake looked between the 2 women who had just transformed his world. "The tribe will accept this?" "The tribe," Kaya said with a wicked smile, "has been waiting for you to catch up to what they already knew. Apache men have always been blessed with multiple wives when the spirits decree it. And the spirits," Ayana added, "have been very clear about their intentions." As they made their way back to the village under the watchful stars, Jake marveled at the turn his life had taken. He had come to the desert seeking adventure and found something far more precious, a love that transcended boundaries, a passion that knew no limits, and a future filled with possibilities he had never dared to imagine. In their lodge that night, as he lay between the two women who had claimed his heart and soul, Jake understood that he had truly found his home. Not just in the physical sense, but in the deeper realm of the spirit, where wild hearts could run free, and love could take any form it chose. The broken arrow position had indeed broken him, broken his preconceptions, his limitations, his narrow view of what love could be. And in that breaking, he had found a wholeness he never knew he was missing. Outside, the desert wind sang its ancient song, carrying the promise of more adventures to come, more boundaries to cross, more territories of the heart to explore. And Jake smiled in his sleep, knowing that with Ayanna and Kaya by his side, he was ready for whatever wild country lay ahead.